Can you picture these words? Before pushing me into an October storm and locking the door behind me, my father spoke those final words to me. Leave my home. A sick daughter is not necessary for me. I was 15. Algebra homework was in my school backpack, and the rain was already seeping through my trainers. I had no money, no phone, and no coat. The police called him 3 hours later, and his face turned as white as a ghost upon hearing what they had to say. However, it was already too late. My name is Sher Walls. Now that I'm 28, I'm sitting in my flat in Boston, watching the rain come down the window. My kitchen table has a letter on it. Cheap nursing home stationery with shaky handwriting. My father wants to meet me after we haven't spoken for 13 years. Claims to be dying. Expresses regret. It's funny how rain always reminds me of that evening. October 14, 2011. It seemed like any other Tuesday when I got home from school. With my head full of the algebra test I just aced, I carried my rucksack over one shoulder. Dinner, homework, the band poster I wanted to purchase with my birthday money, and other typical 15-year-old thoughts were on my mind. I had no idea that I would be trudging through a freezing blizzard by myself in less than 2 hours and worrying if I would make it through the night. I could tell something wasn't right as soon as I walked through that front door. Looking like a volcano about to erupt, my father stood in the living room. Raw meat was the color of his face. He had empty pill bottles in one hand and a wad of cash in the other, both of which were trembling. My sister Karen was standing directly behind him. She was 19 years old, 4 years older than me, and she looked like a loving elder sister who had just learnt something horrible about her younger sibling. Her expression was frightened, anxious, and heartbroken. However, I could see her eyes. She couldn't completely hide that tiny flicker, but I saw it. Contentment. Jolene, our stepmother, stood silently in the kitchen doorway with her lips pulled together and her arms crossed. That was her area of expertise, remaining silent while negative things occurred. I was not even allowed to set down my rucksack by my father. He began to scream as if I had set the house on fire. He said that for months I had been stealing from his wallet. He said that I had been purchasing medications and concealing them in my room. Karen had discovered the proof, he said. I had money crammed into my drawers. I have pill bottles in my closet. Text messages that demonstrated I was conversing with drug traffickers. I made an effort to clarify. I made an effort to explain that I had never handled his wallet. I've never seen those drugs. Had no idea what he was discussing. However, I realized something terrible, and the words died in my throat. He was not paying attention. He had already made up his mind. Karen had been prepping him all day, feeding him falsehoods like sugar-coated poison. She told him she had tried so hard to help me as she stood there looking heartbroken, made an effort to stop me. She claimed that although she hadn't wanted to inform him, she was unable to continue to watch her younger sister ruin herself. It was an Academy Award-worthy performance, and my father took it all in as gospel. He pulled me in the direction of the front door after grabbing my arm firmly enough to cause bruises. I dropped my rucksack there. He grabbed it and hurled it so forcefully at my chest that I staggered back. He then unlocked the door. Sheets of rain were already falling. Somewhere in the distance, thunder is rolling. Since that morning, the temperature had decreased by 15 degrees. My father repeated such statements while staring me in the eyes. Leave my home. A sick daughter is not necessary for me. I was shoved onto the porch by him. The door banged shut. The deadbolt made a click. Suddenly, at the age of 15, I was without a place to live. For about 5 minutes I stood still on the porch. It was shock, not the cold, though it was on the horizon. I waited for the door to open once more, awaiting a response from someone. Everything was a major miscommunication. No one showed up. I had my phone on the desk in my bedroom. I could only take hold of what I already had. I had a half-eaten granola bar, textbooks, and nothing at all that would help me survive a night outside in my backpack. No money, no jacket, and no method to make a help call. 2011. Somewhere, pay ones were still in use, but who carries quarters? Not a 15-year-old who bought band posters with her stipend. Priorities, correct? Straight a pupil with no survival skills. I then began to walk. I didn't deliberately choose where to go. My body simply went on autopilot to the only location I knew that was safe. The home of my grandmother Dorothy is 7 miles away. The mother of my mother. The one individual who consistently gave me the impression that I was important. When you're driving 7 miles doesn't seem like much. It might as well be 700 degrees when you're going through freezing rain in canvas trainers without a coat. I could see Route 9 in front of me. Rain has made everything slick and dark. Automobiles raced by without slowing. I was merely a shadow at the side of the road, a figure that no one wanted to examine too carefully. My clothes were soaked all the way to my skin within the first mile. I lost feeling in my fingertips after the second mile. My teeth were chattering so much after the third mile that I was afraid they would break. However, I continued to walk. What more could I do? Return and ask my dad to trust me. He had already decided. There was nothing else I could do but move forward. One numb step at a time. The problem with hypothermia is that you don't become aware of it until it's nearly too late. Part by part, your body begins to shut down. And your mind becomes cloudy, and all of a sudden it seems like the best thing in the world to sit down for a minute. Take a brief break till you can breathe again. Before my legs gave out, I traveled for miles. Up ahead was a mailbox. I recall thinking that I would simply rest against it for a moment to collect my breath before continuing. It was about 3 miles to Grandma's place. My knees gave out before I could reach my destination, but I could make it. The gravel rose quickly, and soon it was all dark. My father's phone rang 3 hours after he threw his daughter into a storm. The other person's voice was professional and icy. Daniels, a county police officer. An incident had occurred. On Route 9, his daughter was discovered unresponsive due to hypothermia. They were taking her to County General Hospital. And one more thing, sir. Notification has been sent to Child Protective Services. There is already a caseworker present. We want to know why a 15-year-old girl was wandering by herself in a hazardous storm without a phone or coat. You will need to visit the hospital and provide any supporting documentation. My dad's face turned as white as bone. The hospital staff informed me later, so I know. He appeared to be a man seeing his entire life fall apart in slow motion, they added. When he received the call, Karen was standing just beside him. Her flawless mask briefly slipped for the first time, yet it was sufficient. This is the problem with that evening. The thing that made all the difference. It wasn't just a stranger on her way home who discovered me asleep on the side of the road. Gloria Hensley was her name, and she had worked for Child Protective Services for 35 years. She has witnessed all forms of child abuse, neglect, and deception. When she saw a teenage girl in the rain without a coat, phone, or anyone searching for her, she understood precisely what she was looking at. She was not going to overlook it either. That evening, my father believed he was solving a problem, believed he was keeping the house tidy, eliminating the rotten apple, and shielding his family from a sick daughter who wasn't worthy of his affection. In reality, though, he lit a fuse, and he didn't know what was going to blow up. Before we go any further, if you are enjoying the narrative, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. Everything is visible to me. I sincerely appreciate your help. I must now take you back to the time when everything began to come apart in order to fully comprehend what transpired that evening, and the reasons behind my sister's actions. Patricia, my mother, passed away in 2006. Cancer. I was 10 years old. Karen was 14. Our mother used to braid my hair for school photos and make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The following day, we stood by a hospital bed and observed machines beeping more and more slowly until they completely stopped. It wasn't handled well by my father. To put it mildly, yes. Like a fading star, he essentially fell in on himself. Went to work, returned home, settled into his recliner, and gazed blankly. Around him, the home might have caught fire. Furthermore, I doubt he would have noticed. Karen took the initiative. She started cooking dinner, signing permission forms, and making sure I went to school on time when I was 14. She developed into the mature, responsible daughter my father could rely on, and he was always complimenting her on it. Karen, without you, how would I manage? Karen, you're very mature. Karen, you are the glue that keeps this family together. He never once inquired about how she was coping with our mother's passing, I believe. All he expected was that she would take care of the rest. There were 2 blind spots in my father's life. His cherished armchair and his eldest daughter. He was unable to perceive that both were worn out, crumbling at the seams, and in dire need of replacement. Males relaxing in their chairs. I promised that what happened when he wasn't looking was what no one witnessed and what my father vehemently refused to see. Karen wasn't merely taking the initiative. She was constructing a kingdom. I was the peasant who had to be kept in her place in her kingdom. It began modestly. The night before it was due, homework inexplicably vanished. My teachers never received the permission slips for field excursions. In the washing machine, my favorite shirt shrank. Then one more. I'm sorry. It had to have been an accident. My pals never received the birthday party invitations I sent out. Classmates lost messages. Without my knowledge, a reputation is being developed brick by brick. She would go to my instructors with this dejected, worried look and tell them that I was having a hard time following the death of our mother, that I was behaving out at home, and that they should be patient with me. Because she was so responsible, mature, and kind, everyone believed her when she depicted a disturbed child. Once I sat down with my father and tried to explain that Karen was undermining me, that she was lying to everyone about me, and that there was a big problem. He gave me a look that suggested I was insane. "You're just jealous of your sister," he replied. "She's attempting to assist this family. You ought to be appreciative." I learned to keep my mouth shut after that. Keep quiet, keep little, and endure until I can escape. My father remarried 2 years after my mother passed away. At first, Jolene was rather pleasant. She baked casseroles, smiled a lot, and made a great effort to become a member of our family. Karen began phoning her mother right away. I believe it was a calculated move to solidify her status as the devoted and virtuous daughter. I was unable to do it. My true mother had only been gone for 2 years, so I couldn't call this stranger Mum. It had nothing to do with Jolene. It had to do with my own heart not being prepared. But I paid a price for that silent resistance. Jolene treated me like a stranger in my own house after that day. She started a small club with Karen. I wasn't invited either. The lines were well defined by the time I was 15. Karen was the favorite, the golden child, and the one who was perfect. I was the daughter who simply couldn't get it together, the one who was problematic and challenging. Then there was the cash. Before she passed away, my mother had established trust funds for the two of us. $45,000 apiece, available upon our 18th birthday. It was something but hardly a fortune. A mother who realized she wouldn't be around to support us when we began our adult lives gave us a safety net. Karen received her share right away after turning 18 in 2009. In 11 months it vanished. A fancy sports car, high-end clothing, pricey presents for her lover Trent, a big-thinking, smooth-talking man, and no real source of income. Karen was broke by the time I was expelled 2 years later. Trent was constantly talking about his next great opportunity, his next investment plan, the deal that would undoubtedly make them rich, and her trust fund was a faraway memory. Unless something happened to me first, my $45,000 was just sitting there, unreachable until I turned 18 in 2014. You see, my mother included a safeguard in her trust that she likely believed would benefit us. A court-appointed family guardian would oversee the daughter's share until she recovered if she was deemed legally incompetent or placed in an institution before turning 21. Trent and Karen deduced the meaning of that. Someone would have to oversee my trust fund on my behalf if I was institutionalized for substance misuse, for example, because my father discovered cash, pills, and proof of drug trading in my room. Someone trustworthy, accountable, and like a worried older sister who only had my best interests in mind. $45,000. Karen valued me for that. She paid that price for her own sister. She ruined my life the week before. She carried out her plan. My father's ATM card was used to make little cash withdrawals from his account. Since she was in charge of all household finances, she was aware of his PIN. Trent gathered and preserved his empty medication bottles. A prepaid burner phone filled with phony text messages that was bought at a convenience store. Karen sneaked into my room and planted everything on October 14th, while I was eating breakfast and preparing for my algebra test. I have cash in my dresser drawer, pills in my closet, and a piece of paper with my drug dealer's phone number on it. Then, sobbing, she told our father that his youngest daughter had a dreadful secret. Every word was true to him. Why wouldn't he? For 9 years, Karen had been the ideal daughter, the responsible one, the one who never told lies. And before I even realized the portrait existed, I had been depicted as the disturbed one for 9 years. My trial was ended by the time I entered that home door after school. Exile was the punishment for the guilty verdict. That's how I found myself going towards my grandmother's house on Route 9 in October rain, as if it were the last light left in the world. However, Karen's flawless plan had one small flaw. Gloria Hensley was not taken into consideration. The gravel biting into my palms is all I can recall about collapsing. After that, nothing. Similar to someone turning off a TV in the middle of a program, I can only recall waking up. The smell of industrial floor cleaner and antiseptic, fluorescent lights, and a scratchy hospital blanket wrapped around me as if I were something delicate and needed to be protected. It had been years since I had felt like that. A woman was seated next to my bed. She had a paperback novel closed in her lap, reading glasses on her nose, and silver hair tucked back into a tidy bun. She had the appearance of a grandma, the kind that always had Kleenex in her purse and baked cookies. However, she had keen, perceptive eyes that cataloged everything they came across. Gloria Hensley was her name. After working for Child Protective Services for 35 years, she retired at the age of 67. She had witnessed every form of child abuse, neglect, and violence that adults could inflict. Additionally, she was heading home from a book club meeting on a chilly October night when her headlights caught something on the side of the road. An adolescent girl was alone, drenched, and unconscious. Gloria's tire screamed against the pavement when she stopped so quickly. In her trunk was an emergency blanket. She wrapped me up like a burrito and dialed 911, old behaviors from her CPS days. Until the paramedics came, she stayed with me. She went to the hospital with the ambulance, and she was still there when I woke up 4 hours later. I could have been saved by that woman. She was the perfect person at the perfect time, not simply because she discovered me before the hypothermia finished what the storm had begun. When I opened my eyes, she gave me a cup of coffee. Coffee from the hospital cafeteria. The kind that is brewed at 200 degrees and tastes like sorrow. "This is awful," she remarked. "It's warm though." I chuckled. Genuinely chuckled, and she smiled back for the first time in hours or even days. She seemed to understand more than I did, as evidenced by her kind and perceptive smile. She said, "There she is. Why don't you explain to me why a 15-year-old went out on Route 9 by themselves during a storm without a phone or a coat?" I told her everything then. The years of Karen's manipulation, the charges, the fabricated evidence. Since no one had ever truly listened, I told her things I had never told anyone. Gloria simply sat there, nodding now and then, without questioning or interjecting. She was silent for a long time after I was done. "I believe you, and I'm going to help you prove it," she continued. My life was altered by those 7 words. Things had been going on while I was unconscious. A minor was discovered in a hazardous scenario. Therefore, the hospital called the police. My next of kin was contacted by the police. I had to give my dad a call. When Officer Daniels broke the news to him, I would have loved to see his reaction. Seems to have gone somewhat like this. "Your 15-year-old daughter, Mr. Walls, was discovered unconscious on Route 9. She claims that during a storm this evening, you threw her out of your house. Hypothermia. She works as a county general. You must come in. Additionally, Child Protective Services has been informed, sir. There is already a caseworker present. Bring any supporting documentation you may have." Around 10:15 that evening, my father and Karen arrived at the hospital. By then, I was awake and sat upright in my hospital bed with Gloria at my side. A uniformed police officer and Maria Santos, a CPS caseworker, were also there. Not quite the welcome committee that my father had anticipated. He appeared startled but not yet guilty. Just perplexed and irritated. As if all of this was a major annoyance. Karen was just behind him, and I noticed her appear anxious for the first time in my life. There was no sign of the sneer she had been sporting when I departed. They anticipated discovering a terrified, contrite girl prepared to confess her transgressions and plead to return home. Rather, they discovered a room full of experts asking tough questions about why a youngster was out on their own in hazardous weather without any means of protection or communication. Karen sensed that the balance of power had changed. She attempted to execute her standard script. Troublesome younger sibling, worried older sister. All we want is what's best for her. Maria Santos, however, could not believe it. She had a keen sense of deceit thanks to her 30 years of social work experience, and Karen was raising all the red flags. My grandmother then showed up. Dorothy Reeves was a 67-year-old, 5 feet 2 inches woman of unwavering will who was not in the mood for foolishness. She had never trusted my father or his new family. I was her only grandchild, and my mother was her only daughter. The hospital was 40 minutes away from her home. In 25 she succeeded. Before I even saw her, I could hear her approaching down the corridor at a businesslike speed with the characteristic click of sensible heels. Like a tiny hurricane with silver hair, she swept into my room and put herself between my father and me right away. "That's my granddaughter," she declared to everyone in attendance. "What has this fool done now?" In an attempt to defend himself, my father began discussing the proof, the medications, and the theft. Dorothy held up one hand after listening for around 30 seconds. "I've known you for 15 years and you've never been the sharpest tool in the shed, but this might be your dumbest moment yet," she remarked. "For what reason did you throw a child into a storm? Suddenly there were pills. Money that appeared out of thin air. Have you even inquired about her perspective?" His mouth opened, closed, and then opened once again. Dorothy gave a nod. "I had that thought. This is my grandmother's problem. She battled for me in addition to loving me." Dorothy Reeves went to war that night while I sat in a hospital bed, tired and hypothermic. She insisted on a hearing for emergency custody. That's exactly there and then. She didn't care that it was almost midnight. She contacted a judge in family court who owed her a favor. Dorothy reportedly got him on the phone after she and his wife had served on the PTA for 15 years. The data were given by the hospital social worker. A little youngster was sent into hazardous weather. Before being expelled, no investigation was carried out. No effort was made to confirm charges. A child with early-stage hypothermia was discovered unconscious. No expert has investigated the father's testimony. I had a new house by 12:30 in the morning. Dorothy Reeves was given emergency temporary guardianship, which took effect right away. Until a thorough inquiry was finished, my father was told not to communicate with me. Everyone would be interviewed by CPS. My father, Jolene, Karen, and I would be closely examining that said evidence. My father made another attempt as we were leaving the hospital. He extended his hand and began to speak. Dorothy took a step between us without pausing. She said, "You can't touch her. You are not allowed to speak with her. You squandered the opportunity to be her father. Flung it into a hurricane, literally. We're heading out now." Even though the vehicle heater was already blaring, she led me outside to her ancient Buick, which she had been driving since before I was born, assisted me into the passenger seat, and wrapped another blanket around me. Tears were running down my face as I stared at her. "I don't even have clean clothing, Grandma. I have nothing." Her eyes were both ferocious and gentle as she patted my hand. "I have a Target card and you have me, honey. We go shopping tomorrow. You eat soup tonight and sleep in a bed that will never be thrown out." That was my new life's first night. There were 3 regulations in Grandma Dorothy's home. Homework before TV, breakfast at 8, and no nonsense before her second cup of coffee. It wasn't large or ornate, but it was cozy, secure, and loving. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. However, the tale wasn't finished. Not even near. My grandmother received a call from the CPS inspector 2 weeks later. "You might want to sit down," Maria Santos remarked to Mrs. Reeves. "We have been reviewing the evidence that Mr. Walls presented. We discovered some security tape that presents a very different picture. And the timetable doesn't add up." Karen had no idea what was about to happen to her flawless plan. Everything was altered by the investigation. Maria Santos was more than a caseworker who checked boxes. She was a cardigan-clad investigator. Additionally, she traced the evidence rather than merely examining it. Every thread, every timestamp, every receipt. Karen's flawless narrative began to fall apart the more she tugged. The money was the first step. I had discovered $800 in my dresser drawer. It demonstrated, according to my father, that I had been robbing him for months. "You mean an open and closed case?" Maria Santos, however, verified the bank documents. On October 14th, the day I was expelled, I made a single ATM withdrawal that resulted in that $800. The machine's security footage was supplied by the bank. Timestamp: 2:47 p.m. I wasn't the one on camera. Karen was the one. as clear as day. She had been wearing the same jacket that morning, the same ponytail, the same vehicle as parked in the distance. She had backed into a mailbox the summer before, leaving a damage in the bumper of her white vehicle. The problem with alibis is this. I had an airtight one. I was studying molecular bonds in 5th period chemistry class on October 14th at 2:47 p.m. I was present until 3:15, according to the school attendance system. I asked a query about covalent electrons according to my teacher. That withdrawal would not have been possible for me. Physically not feasible. 12 miles away. I was in a classroom with 30 witnesses and a computerized check-in system. Karen believed she was very smart. The problem with being a criminal mastermind, however, is this. You really need to be intelligent. She didn't realize that banks have cameras when she used our father's ATM card. She didn't ask if I had an alibi before making the withdrawal in the middle of the afternoon. On camera, wearing yoga clothes and with her car visible in the parking lot, she purchased the burner phone at a convenience store 2 blocks from her gym. Capes are worn by some masterminds. Karen was caught driving for an additional 10 minutes because she was wearing Lululemon. The medicines came next. A prescription for Trent Barlow was linked to the bottles found in my closet. The guy who has all the huge ideas but no real job is Karen's boyfriend. His doctor's prescription for anxiety medicine was filled at the Oak Street Pharmacy. Maria Santos gave that pharmacy a call. A fascinating discovery. Trent had filed a police report, reported the theft of those medications, and claimed that someone had broken into his car and taken them. Extremely worried citizenry. However, he submitted that report on October 17, 3 days after my expulsion. Why did Trent wait 3 days to report the theft if those drugs had already been taken and concealed in my room on October 14? The solution was clear. Since they weren't pilfered. In order to hide their tracks and obtain a refill, he reported them missing after Karen gave them to him to place. The delayed theft report resembled a neon sign that read, "We planned this." I hope you will stay tuned if this narrative resonates with you, because it will be worth every second. If you're rooting for me, please hit like. It is quite important. The burner phone, however, was the true smoking gun. 4 days before things went wrong on October 10th, a prepaid phone bought at a convenience store was used to send the fictitious drug dealer SMS. Maria Santos located the store and asked to see their security footage. The buyer was a young woman with athletic build and brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She paid cash, but her automobile was visible through the window. A white vehicle with a bumper ding. The same vehicle, the same woman, and the same breadcrumb trail that led directly to my sister. An even more repulsive image surfaced as the investigation progressed. Maria Santos began looking into our family's finances, particularly the checks that had been written on my father's account during the previous 2 years. The $800 seemed like pocket change after what she discovered. For almost 2 years, someone had been forging checks in my father's name. They started out small, 50 here, 100 there, but they added up. The signatures were nearly identical, but not quite. The funds were transferred to accounts associated with Trent Barlow and his many business endeavors. Just under $18,000 was the total amount stolen. I wasn't simply set up by Karen. She needed me gone before anyone saw that she had been robbing our father blind for years. Dorothy, my grandma, was not going to overlook this. Leonard Vance, a longtime family friend who had been a family lawyer for 30 years, was recruited by her. Patricia, my mother, was someone he had known since elementary school. His expression hardened when Dorothy told him what had happened, and I was relieved that he was on my side. Leonard promptly applied for permanent guardianship. In addition, he sued Karen in civil court for emotional anguish, fraud, and everything else he could get to stick. And he ensured that my trust fund was safeguarded with extra supervision, so that no one could access it until I was 18. I still remember what I learned that year. Maintain a record of everything. Make a note of every receipt, message, and promise you receive. Every significant document in my grandmother's life was stored in a folder. Tax returns, bills, letters, and warranties. She referred to it as her paper insurance. Following all of that, I began acting in the same manner. I purchased my first filing cabinet when I was 16 years old. Keep it and continue to use it. Certain practices can save your life. After years of holding my breath, living with Grandma Dorothy was like learning to breathe again. Her home wasn't large or opulent. There were 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom and a kitchen that smelt like cinnamon and coffee, but it was safe, warm and no one was planning to harm me. She enrolled me at a new school where my past was unknown. It was the first time I had true pals. People who liked me for who I was, not because they had been told a false narrative about who I should be. In order to finally understand the years of manipulation I had unknowingly absorbed, I began visiting a counselor. Grandma Dorothy didn't have many rules, but she was very particular about one. Dinner is served at 6. There are no exceptions. Chaos can wait until after the meatloaf, she added. The best counsel I've ever received, to be honest. My father's world was collapsing in the meantime. The Wall family as a whole was scrutinized by the CPS investigation. Raymond was questioned several times, growing increasingly worn out and perplexed with each session. How could he have missed so much? How could he have been so blind? In the guest room, Jolene began to sleep. Their conversations became abrupt, hostile, and full of accusations that neither of them wanted to voice aloud. Karen was enraged. She was furious that her scheme had failed. Yet she was neither sorry nor never sorry. She placed the blame on everyone but herself. The CPS investigator was prejudiced. The video from the bank was deceptive. There was a miscommunication regarding Trent's medication records. She was unable to tolerate the golden child's crown slipping. Leonard Vance built an airtight case over the course of several months. Paperwork from pharmacies, bank data, security camera footage, and phone purchase receipts. He gathered witness statements from Gloria Hensley, my teachers, and neighbors who had observed Karen's automobile arriving and departing at strange times. Some of Karen's old pals even come forward. It turned out that she had damaged many relationships over the years, and people were delighted to tell tales of her deceit, and callous brutality. March 2012 was the scheduled court date. However, an unforeseen event occurred 1 month prior to the hearing. In Nevada, Trent Barlow was arrested. He was arrested by federal marshals for operating the same investment fraud in 3 different jurisdictions. Victims who trusted him with their savings had more than $400,000 stolen. He might spend up to 15 years behind bars due to serious federal allegations. The following day, his attorney called. Trent was prepared to work with others to reach an agreement and to be honest about everything, including his fiancée Karen's abuse of her younger sister. Karen had nowhere to flee as the walls got closer. Trent Barlow was a multifaceted individual. A liar, a scam artist, a man whose entire life had been based on the money and trust of others. However, he lacked loyalty. The instant federal prosecutors offered him a lighter sentence in return for his cooperation. With a record deal, he revealed all. 12 pages made up his written declaration. Everything was confirmed by him. Karen had come up with the notion to frame me from the start. For almost 2 years, she had been stealing from our father and giving Trent money for his investments. She decided she needed a scapegoat when she realized it was becoming more difficult to conceal her theft. I was that scapegoat. I was the ideal target, Karen thought. Nobody would believe the troublesome younger sister, the one who would never fit in. She explained to Trent that institutionalizing me would simultaneously address 2 issues. If the money went missing, she would have someone to blame. As my guardian, she would also have access to my trust fund. $45,000. She intended to steal that from me as I sat in a facility, drugged, discredited, and all alone myself. Trent jotted everything down. The planning meetings, the pill bottles he gave, the burner phone Karen bought, and the day she placed the evidence in my room. He even revealed text exchanges they exchanged in the days preceding October 14th. Messages that demonstrated that this was not a rash decision. It was cold, deliberate, and calculated. I remembered his last words. Karen claimed that her sister was unimportant and would not defend herself. She was mistaken. Family Court, March 2012. By then, I had been living with Grandma Dorothy for 5 months. I had put on a healthy amount of weight. The type that results from eating a regular diet and getting enough sleep. At my new school, I was promoted to honor roll. I had begun to recall what it was like to be a typical adolescent. But as soon as I entered the courtroom, I felt like a 15-year-old again, small, afraid, and unsure of whether anyone would believe me. My hand was gripped by Grandma Dorothy. Gloria Hensley was also present, seated in the gallery with the same stern attitude and reading spectacles as the night she had discovered me. Leonard Vance nodded comfortingly. The purpose of the hearing was to discuss guardianship and other straightforward matters, such as establishing support obligations and making Dorothy's interim custody permanent. However, it became into much more. The district attorney had intervened. This was no longer just a family court case thanks to Trent's confession and the abundance of evidence Maria Santos had gathered. On the table were criminal charges. Karen sat on the other side of the courtroom with a public defender she'd met an hour before. She was paler and smaller than I had remembered. The self-assured, attractive child who had ruled our home for 10 years appeared to be just that, a terrified young lady whose deceit had now caught up with her. In the gallery, our father sat by himself. Jolene had declined to attend. He appeared to have aged 10 years in just 5 months. The evidence was presented in a methodical, expert, and devastating manner. Karen's withdrawal at 2:47 p.m. is captured on TM tape. My attendance records from school attest to the fact that I was in chemistry class at that very moment. Trent's conveniently postponed theft report is displayed in pharmacy records. Karen is seen purchasing the burner phone and security footage from the convenience store. $18,000 worth of fraudulent checks during a 2-year period. And Trent's admission. Word after word. Read into the record. When Karen's turn to testify came, she made an effort to stick to her tale, appearing perplexed, naive, and genuinely worried about her disturbed sister. The prosecutor wasn't having it. "M. Walls," she said, displaying the picture of the ATM. "Is this you at First National Bank on October 14th at 2:47 p.m.?" Karen took a swallow. She looked at the image of herself, clear as daylight. "I was receiving money to buy groceries." "Groceries?" The prosecutor gave a slow nod. $800 to buy food. When you accused your sister of stealing that identical sum later that day, you failed to bring up this withdrawal with your father. Quiet. And where this ATM is located? Your sister's school is 12 miles away. She was present at the school until 3:15 p.m., according to attendance records. Could you explain how she was able to withdraw while in chemistry class? More quiet. There was nothing to object to, notwithstanding Karen's public defender's objections. The proof was the proof. Facts did not give a damn about how she felt. They then gave Jolene a call. My stepmother seems to wish she were somewhere else. She had remained silent, impartial, and uninvolved for years. However, she was under oath in this courtroom. And all of a sudden there was no way to remain silent. She was questioned by the prosecutor regarding the morning of October 14th. Did she notice anything out of the ordinary? Jolene's voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Around 7:00 a.m. that day, Karen entered Sherry's room. "I'm borrowing a hair tie," she said. "Did she wear a hair tie when she emerged?" "No, she didn't have anything." "In the days preceding the occurrence, did you observe anything else?" Jolene shut her eyes. She appeared to be preparing for impact. "I heard Karen talking to Trent on the phone 2 days prior." "Everything is in place," she declared. She then burst out laughing. The courtroom became completely motionless. I nearly felt terrible for our father when they called him to testify. He had to defend his decision to throw his 15-year-old daughter into a storm without looking into the charges against her. He had to acknowledge that he had never personally reviewed the bank data. Karen's rapid discovery of this proof was never questioned. I was never asked for my perspective. I just trusted her. He continued, his voice breaking. She is my firstborn. She was always the one in charge. I didn't think he could finish. Patricia Morrison had served as a judge for 30 years. She had witnessed ugly custody disputes, acrimonious divorces, and families split apart by pride, money, and falsehoods. However, I believe that even she was troubled by what she had heard. Her remarks were like a knife in the courtroom. "Mr. Walls, carelessness cannot be justified by trust. On the basis of unsubstantiated allegations, you banished a little child into hazardous weather. You didn't try to look into it. You made the decision to favor one daughter over another without any justification, proof, or fundamental parental judgment. Parenting isn't like that. Abandonment is what that is." As she went on, my father sat there looking gray. "Your older daughter participated in a planned, deliberate plot to ruin her sister's life. She deceived you, stole from you, and tricked you into taking part in her brutality. And you gave in to her because it was simpler to believe the daughter who cheered you up than to genuinely care for the daughter who needed you. Karen delivered a forceful sentence. Theft, fraud, giving false information to the police, and endangering children. To avoid a full trial, her public lawyer worked out a plea agreement. 5 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, complete restitution of all stolen money, including the $18,000 from our father and the $800 she had planted to frame me, and a 2-year suspended sentence, which meant she wouldn't go to jail until she broke probation. A permanent restraining order was also imposed by the court. For whatever reason, Karen was not permitted to get in touch with me directly or indirectly. She would immediately go to jail if she got within 500 feet of me. This is the part that would always follow her. She will always have a felony conviction on her record. No more working with children or vulnerable individuals, no careers in finance, and no jobs involving money or trust. Now the golden child had a scarlet letter, and it would not come off. My father's guardianship rights were permanently revoked. He was mandated to cover my educational and therapeutic costs until I reached 21. Additionally, he was mandated to use the reparation funds to create a college fund. Everything was discovered by the community. Small town's converse. Everyone found out what Raymond Walls had done to his younger daughter in a matter of weeks. Friends stopped phoning. The neighbors averted their eyes. Every time he attempted to attend his religious group, scheduling issues arose. 6 weeks later, Jolene filed for divorce. She was aware that she had contributed to my pain, and she couldn't bear to be reminded of it each time she glanced at her husband. At the conclusion, the judge turned to face me. "Miss Walls," she remarked, "you've demonstrated incredible fortitude in the face of extreme cruelty. Your grandma, Dorothy Reeves, has been granted full permanent custody by the court. Until you turn 18, your trust fund will be safeguarded. And I genuinely hope that your future will be better than your past." I wanted to say something memorable and witty. "Your Honor, you should see me parallel park," was what I wanted to say. Some jokes are just for you, but that's the true measure of character. And humor was inappropriate at that moment. I simply said, "Thank you," instead. My father made one final attempt to get close to me as we left the courthouse. He began, "Sweetheart, I'm delighted that Grandma Dorothy moved between us without faltering. She spoke in a cold tone. You may no longer refer to her that way. The moment you put her into a storm, you lost that." We continued to stroll. I didn't turn around. That day the sun was beaming. In our region of the nation, marches can go either way. However, it was a sunny, warm, and promising afternoon. I had a caseworker, a retired CPS supervisor, a grandma who adored me, and a lawyer who had spoken up for me. And at last I had a future. However, some tales don't stop at the courtroom. There is an additional chapter in certain stories. A letter arrived 13 years later. October of 2024. Now that I'm 28, my life doesn't resemble what I had in mind when I was 15. Carrying only a school backpack and drenched trainers while navigating a downpour. Boston is where I reside. Lovely flat with a harbor view. Windows let in beams of morning light. In reality, I made my own decision. I work for a tech company as the director of marketing. Good people, good pay, and good perks. Every promotion seemed like a step removed from my former self as I worked my way up from an internship. I'm also engaged. Colin is his name. You can learn almost everything you need to know about his heart from the fact that he works as a pediatric nurse. 2 years ago, we met at a charity function. I was there on business. He truly cared, which is why he was there. After spilling wine on my dress and apologizing nonstop for 10 minutes, he had me laugh so much that I forgot I was irritated. In the spring, we will tie the knot. Life is pleasant. Life is truly amazing. Then the letter showed up. It arrived at the residence of my grandmother. At 80 years old, Dorothy still resides in the same home, maintains her 3 rules, and is as intelligent as ever. Eat breakfast at 8. Finish your homework before watching TV, and avoid foolishness before coffee. Certain things are always the same. She informed me over the phone that I needed to see something that had arrived. She sounded cautious and impartial, the way she does when she's attempting to avoid influencing my choices. That weekend I took a drive down. The envelope had sloppy handwriting on plain white, inexpensive paper. I hardly recognized it. Maple Grove Care Center, a nursing home approximately 1 hour away from my childhood home, was the return address. With a chilly cup of coffee in my hands, I opened it at Dorothy's kitchen table. It started, "Dear Sherry, I am aware that I have nothing to ask of you. I am aware that you have every reason to discard this letter without reading it. Nevertheless, I'm asking because I need to say this before I leave, and I don't have much time left. I'm currently in Maple Grove. Had a stroke 2 years prior. The left side is no longer as effective. Jolene is no longer with us. Fled to Florida with an accountant she met online after stealing half of everything. The house has been sold. The life I believed I had is completely gone. Last week, Karen paid me a visit. I refused to allow her into the room. I am unable to gaze upon her. Her falsehoods have made it impossible for me to hear her voice without recalling what I did. The only person I need to apologize to and the only person I want to see is you. As your father, I let you down in the worst way a dad can let a child down. I preferred lies to the truth. I put comfort ahead of fairness. I discarded you as if you were unimportant. I am aware that you owe me nothing. However, I would like to personally apologize to you before it's too late if you could find it in your heart to come just once. I sat there for a long time, Raymond, your father. The coffee cooled. Across the table, the afternoon light changed. Dorothy remained silent. She simply waited like she always did, letting me figure things out on my own. 13 years of establishing a life without him, 13 years of stillness. Was there anything I owed him? No, I didn't. But my mother was on my mind. Before she passed away, I considered the kind of person she had brought me up to be. I considered ending cycles rather than continuing them. I made the decision to go. For me, not for him. The nursing facility was just what you would anticipate. Industrial floors, fluorescent lights, and the odor of disinfectant attempting to mask the odor of endings. My dad had a little room. There was only one window, a single bed, and a wall-mounted television that was playing something no one was watching. He was 73 years old, but he appeared 20 years older. He could have passed for 90, though. He was crumpled, gray, and little in a way I had never seen before because the stroke had removed something fundamental from him. When I entered, he started crying. For the first few minutes, he was unable to talk and simply sat there with tears streaming down his face while I stood by the door, questioning whether I had made a mistake. He eventually discovered his voice. The stroke had also robbed some of his vocabulary, so he repeatedly apologized, stammering over words and repeating himself. He claimed to have been nasty, foolish, and blind. He claimed that losing me was the worst thing he had ever done. He claimed that every day he thought about that October night. I let him finish every single night, every time it poured. Didn't interfere or offer him consolation. After that, I said what I had come to say. You have my forgiveness. Relief crumpled his face. But I want you to know what it entails. I moved a chair over to his bed and took a seat. I made sure he was staring at me. I don't forget when I forgive. It indicates that I'm making the decision to let go of my rage. I'm tired of allowing you to occupy space in my heart since it's heavy and has been weighing me down. Because you trusted a falsehood, you flung me into a maelstrom. The proof was so strong that you didn't believe it. Because it was simpler, you trusted it. Because Karen gave you self-confidence. I also reminded you of all the things you had lost when your mother passed away. Over your own daughter, you opted for the cozy lie. Without you, I constructed my whole life. I persevered through college. I developed a career. I'm getting married to a man who would never, ever discard me, much less a hurricane. I'm glad, but you must accept the consequences of your actions. I no longer have to bear that load. You own it. With tears still flowing, he nodded. I doubt he had any more words. I am aware. At last he succeeded. I am aware. All I wanted to do was apologize to you. I had to see you one last time. I stayed for 20 more minutes. We didn't converse much. What else could be said? I informed him about Colin, my job, my flat, surface stuff, and safe things. He listened as if it were the most significant discussion of his life. He stretched out with his good hand as I stood up to go, but he didn't grab. After allowing him to briefly touch my fingertips, I turned to leave. A nurse stopped me in the corridor. You're his daughter, right? The younger one? I gave a nod. She looked at me, then back at his room. Last week your sister stopped by. He told us to send her away and refused to see her. I remained motionless. He was not going to see her. He could only bear to apologize to one daughter, and that wasn't her, the nurse remarked, shaking her head. In fact, he became quite irate over it. Claimed he was unable to look at her face without realizing what she had done. I had no idea how to respond to that. My father had finally discarded Karen, the golden child, the favorite, the one he had blindly trusted. After all these years of being the rejected one, the disposable daughter, the one who wasn't good enough. It's too late to make a difference or make anything better. Nevertheless, there was a change in my chest. Not precisely forgiveness. I had already offered that. Anything closer to conclusion. As the final page of a lengthy book turning at last, I emerged into the October sunshine from that nursing home. Different life, different weather, same month. 13 years ago, October was associated with hypothermia, treachery, and rain. Fall foliage and pumpkin spice are the hallmarks of October. I am basic, yes. It doesn't matter to me. And the anniversary of the start of my actual life. Some storms reroute you instead of destroying you. I lost a house that October night 13 years ago, but I found my home. I found a grandmother who deserved me after losing a father who didn't. I discovered who I am after losing a sibling who never loved me. When I returned to Boston, Colin was there. Containers for takeaway on the counter. A terrible film was playing on the television. That look of patience he gives me when he realizes I need time to process. How did it go? He inquired. I leaned against him after leaving my keys on the table. I think I'm finally done, I declared. I think I can let it go now. Without asking any more questions, he put his arms around me. That's Colin's problem. He is aware of when to push and when to simply be there. I'm marrying him for 1,000 reasons, including this one. My grandmother's house will host the wedding next spring. Good food, close friends, and a small ceremony. The cuisine is already being planned by Dorothy. Without a doubt, meatloaf is on the list. Karen is working night shifts someplace, wondering what went wrong in her life. Alone with his regrets in a nursing home is my father. In Florida, Jolene is acting as though none of us ever existed. However, I'm in Boston. I have a career that I earned, a loving wife, and a grandma who, due to her stubbornness, will most likely outlive us all. Yes, I was able to properly frame that band poster at last. The one I purchased the week before everything broke down with my allowance. A few years ago, I came across the same one on the internet. Paid far too much for it. I can view it every day because I hung it in my office. There are some things that are worth waiting for. I really appreciate you viewing. You've already seen some of my most captivating tales. Don't miss the finest part by clicking one right now. You'll adore it. I'll see you in the upcoming tale.